Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to ServiceNow 911. In the series of Meet Expert, today we have a special guest. He is ServiceNow magician. Yes. And within few seconds, you will witness one of the best explanation of each and every concept of CMDB. He is ServiceNow architect. He is ServiceNow CMA, that is Certified Master Architect as well. He has n number of feathers in his head. So without any delay, please welcome Mr. Chris Scoop. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining today. I appreciate you giving us time and sharing this wonderful information with us. So, before we start, can you please provide your introduction?
Sure. My name is Chris Schuh, and in LinkedIn, I'm known as the ServiceNow Magician. I'm a certified master architect, and I've got some more details that'll come up in the presentation regarding my personal journey.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, with that, can you please share the agenda of the meeting as well?
Sure. Well, the agenda is covered as well during the presentation, so whenever you're ready to start that, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm ready. Please
Okay.
proceed.
Okay, great. So we're here today to talk about your ServiceNow journey and specifically focus on the CMDB and CSDM. So we're going to dive a little into what they are, how they add value to your organization, and move through your journey, and they can support ServiceNow in various areas.
Okay.
So I'd like to begin by discussing how do we build a house together. So there are many stages to building a house. We have to get the permits and understand our building codes. Then we have to dig a hole so that we can set our foundation. And then we can start building the walls, putting on the roof and putting in the windows, adding a door. And then finally we can paint the house so that we're ready to move in. So the foundation piece, and you'll see that it comes first. We have to understand the permits and building codes. And then we also have to start digging the hole and set the foundation correctly. This is what serves as the analogy that we'll reference later on relating to CMDB and CSDM, because those two are foundational pillars, not the only piece of our foundation, but key pieces of our foundation in ServiceNow. So again, my introduction is, my name is Chris Schuh. I'm known as the ServiceNow Magician. I do have a history of performing stage magic all over the world, including 4 tours in India. So we can talk about that later, Omender. This year, I became a ServiceNow Certified Master Architect. So I started the CMA program in January of 2023. I completed it in June of 2023. I've got 2 suite certifications and some mainline certifications as well. And my personal mission is to deliver ServiceNow solutions that work just like magic. Did you have a question?
No, I'm good at the moment.
Oh, thought I heard you. No worries. Okay. So today's discussion is going to be centered around many organizations and how they view the CMDB and their CSDM implementations as purely costs that have to be incurred. And we want to change that narrative to discuss about how CMDB and CSDM can actually drive a lot of value. And we will have a value-led journey that adds this value in just 4 months. So the agenda is, again, we'll briefly cover Now Value and Now Create. These are frameworks that ServiceNow has created for us to use during our implementation phase. We'll discuss the business case around CMDB, CSDM, exactly what they are and the stages within them. We'll talk about some data insights. So how do we use reporting and performance analytics to measure our success? And then our closing remarks. So we do have a lot to get through, but again, feel free to interrupt and ask any questions on the spot. Otherwise, we can discuss them later in the presentation or at the end.
Sure.
Okay. So we know that ServiceNow customers are achieving value by progressing in their CMDB and CSDM journeys. So a challenge that some were facing were that infrastructure teams had siloed data tracking, which resulted in duplicated efforts and inconsistent data, meaning they were tracking, individual teams were tracking CI data in Excel, and perhaps they were tracking the same server in different ways or with different data points in different teams. And service owners therefore lacked infrastructure visibility because there was no business context linked to CI tracking. So these service owners were unaware of the full infrastructure required to successfully deliver their service. So the solutions are that you would implement a mature CMDB, and that will reduce the operational tracking effort and it will normalize the data. And then they would implement a mature CSDM to add that business context to the CMDB and give those service owners that visibility that they need. Some of the results that we've seen clients receive is that they had a 30% increase in source systems being integrated with the CMDB. So therefore, this consolidation effort is now making ServiceNow and the ServiceNow CMDB the central place or the central system of record first, and then it can later evolve more into the system of action or system of engagement. They had 100% visibility for process owners. So process owners now were able to go in and see every single piece of infrastructure that's required to successfully deliver their service. And this added benefits like they were able to understand what change requests were impacting their services and which ones weren't. They were able to notify their user base or the consumers of these services ahead of time with these change requests coming in. And therefore, there was less calls to the service desk and reduced stress on the ecosystem as a result of any changes. They were also able to see a 2.5 times return on their infrastructure investments. So because service owners were able to understand the underlying infrastructure into the services that were being delivered, they were able to make targeted purchase decisions based on this information to deliver a better service, or to see that perhaps there was one service that was having a lot of struggles all the time or was constantly going down, and therefore they needed to add more hardware or replace existing hardware so that these issues could go away. And then finally, there was a reduction of conflicting change requests by about 20%. So people were able to understand that they don't have to come in and submit two different change requests for the same type of CI. One team could come in and see, oh, someone else has already submitted this for us. We don't need to address it. And then the communications from the change management process were also streamlined.
Okay.
Are there any questions before we continue?
Yes. Can you give a small example of CSDM just to get a better understanding right now as we move forward? Some business
Well,
context.
so the business context that it adds is we now will have a service that is delivered. So let's think of a common one like email. Email is delivered through various infrastructure components. And this will get a little technical, but I hope just to understand that you don't have to go through what a switch is and a router and everything. But the data travels from an email, leaves your computer, and it goes through your network, goes through a server, and it goes through various switches and routers before it even goes outside of your organization to hit that. And then on the other side, when they're receiving an email, it has to travel through the same type of journey, but of course it's going to be going through different infrastructure. So the business context would be, we have an email service, and here are all of the servers, routers, switches, all of the infrastructure, even down to what applications have to be up and running on that infrastructure so that email works. Therefore, when a customer calls in or has an issue, they're going to say, I have a problem with email. They're not going to call in and say, server 123 is down. That's an IT term. So this business context allows you to group the infrastructure into a service-based system or a service-based topology. And therefore, with that business context, now we can see the impacts. So if we make a change or if we have to reboot a server, what services are impacted? Who do we need to notify? Or when do we need to schedule it to minimize the impact on the user base? Does that answer?
So it is basically for the end user, right? To make things
Well,
simple.
it's for two sides. So leadership needs to know all of the infrastructure that runs up to that service so that they can see, okay, this service continually goes down, or this one has 100% uptime, and look underneath it. So think of it like your car. I want to sit in my car and I want to turn the key or press the button and have the engine turn on. But all those components within the engine have to work. Otherwise, I can't drive.
Okay.
So I'm the end user there, but then a process owner would maybe need to say, oh, okay, I need to know everything that's under there. And oh, my battery hasn't been replaced in 10 years. It's an older car, let's say. Then they'll need to know what kind of battery is it, and then how do I replace it if I need to. And then that ensures that the service of car starts is up and running for me.
Okay, okay, got it. Please proceed.
Sure. So we'd like to begin, continue on and discuss a bit about the Now Value Framework. So the Now Value Framework is the ServiceNow engagement methodology, and it helps us accelerate our business outcomes. So it is a value-focused approach, and it centers on accelerating value creation. And we reduce our time to production by taking the guesswork out of our transformation journey, because it arms us with the tools, processes, and capabilities to execute with confidence and generate measurable results. And it's also a coordinated experience because we leverage the collective expertise of the entire ServiceNow ecosystem and deliver that coordinated experience through it. You can see here there are 4 phases to the Now Value Framework, and it helps enable you to demonstrate value with ServiceNow. It also can be applied literally in minutes once you kind of have the governance piece rolling. So we'll go through each of them. So the envision phase has us seeing the digital possibilities, and it helps us determine our value potential and developing our goals and strategy and implementation plan. So here what we're trying to have as an outcome is to understand where we are and where we want to be. And then how are we going to measure this and determine how successful we were? So establishing our baseline data. Then we move into the create phase. And that has us evaluating our adoption readiness, meaning how are we going to determine which users are ready to adopt this new technology or not, or this new process. It has us striving to deliver quality project execution. So this is where we're actually building and implementing, testing, and deploying. And we can utilize ServiceNow's best practices to minimize our technical debt. Once we've moved into the create phase, then we go into validate, and that has us measure our realized value. And of course, that is being measured over time. So perhaps back in the envision phase, our target is set to say, we would like to reduce calls to the service desk by 20% within 3 months of deploying to production. And the project that could be doing that is deploying virtual agent, so that end users are able to interact with a chatbot to get their own status updates. Once we are in the validate phase, then we're also reviewing our business outcomes and perhaps benchmarking against our own peers to see if we are as successful as we should be. We do need those specific measurements to track our progress and show us when our outcomes will be achieved. So like I had said earlier, 20% reduction of service calls to the service desk within 3 months of deploying to production. And then finally, the champion phase. This has us building a compelling transformation journey story for different target audiences. So you may have a journey story that is built for the C-suite, and they're going to care about things like how much did we spend, how long did it take, and what business capabilities did we get out of it, and also perhaps what value, tangible value was achieved. So we implemented the virtual agent bot. It took us 3 months to get all of the conversations stood up and built, and it cost us $70,000, and I'm just making these numbers up. And then we were able to see that 20% reduction in calls to the service desk. The agents were able to reduce how long it took to manage those status calls, and the value received was however much dollars we want to turn to that. Versus a process owner. So a process owner cares about how long does this process take to fulfill. So perhaps they're in request management, and it used to take 45 days to complete this onboarding process. And now it's been digitized and optimized in ServiceNow. And now the new time it takes is 15 days. So they're seeing a reduction of 66% in the fulfillment times for that process. And then finally, management, the story would be centered around perhaps I manage the help desk. And that virtual agent project has saved my agents 20% of their time each week. So that's one full day that they're perhaps able to work through a backlog. And the backlog then was cleared within 2 months. So those journey stories to the different audiences really help showcase what we were doing, what our goal was, how successful were we, and then we reframe it, or we kind of target it to these specific audiences so that they can share it within the organization or even external colleagues. And then we can also grow our customer and employee engagement and get positive brand exposure during this champion phase. Are there any questions related to Now Value Framework?
No, it's fine. Please proceed.
Great. So in that Now Value Framework, there was that create phase. And this is where the Now Create framework comes into place. And this is an implementation methodology, and it actually also comes with a library of leading practices. It provides step-by-step guidance. You need to deliver successful projects with ServiceNow by providing consistent implementation guidance to create predictable outcomes in any implementation approach. So think of Now Create like an experienced mentor that can help you check all the boxes and cover all the bases. And it also ties to the building a house analogy because it establishes how we will manage our construction from start to finish. So you can see here there are 5 phases, and we can go through these in detail, but they are covered very well on the ServiceNow Customer Success Center. So I'd recommend everyone take a look at that. But they are initiate, plan, execute, deliver, and close. So during the plan phase, we would also want to stand up other pieces of the project if we're kicking something off brand new. But you'll see that in the exit gates, there is an, there's an exit gate at the end of each of these phases so that there are tangible deliverables. So it enables us to create new workflows fast and get them right the first time. And this Now Create methodology also equips us with everything we need to get the results we want predictably with higher quality and faster time to value. And any project manager that's working in ServiceNow would most likely be going through this methodology, as well as most partners. Are there any questions related to Now Create?
No, it's fine.
Great. Okay. So let's talk now about the business case for a CMDB and the CSDM. So we know that about 80% of unplanned outages are caused by unplanned changes. And 60% of our availability and performance errors are due to misconfigurations. So an example of that could be if we misconfigure our firewall, internet traffic may be blocked. We know the average cost of a critical system is about $110,000 per hour. And this includes lost productivity, includes lost brand lost brand value, etc. We know that reputation and brand value are at risk as well when we're having these issues, and that corrective actions typically are the highest cost. So if there is an outage and it lasts 2 hours, we have to either bring someone in that may have a higher rate to resolve the issue for us, and we have to also factor in all the lost productivity and brand value that's come into play due to that outage. So there is a very strong business case for a CMDB and the CSDM framework as well that layers on top of it. So the CMDB is a purpose-built system for storing your IT infrastructure and its relationships to each other. So not only are we tracking what do we have, but how is it related? Where does a server connect to which switch or to which router? What applications are running on this specific server? So the benefits allow us to connect our digital products, and we can then start to achieve data-driven outcomes. And if we don't implement a healthy CMDB, you risk not being able to manage digital life cycles, and you're not able to trust your CI data or configuration item data. So the up-to-date CMDB will enable us to take control of infrastructure security configurations and improve our security as well, and deliver enterprise visibility of assets and business services in the organization and their security risks. So how do we show value with the CMDB? Well, we know that currently the people are tracking things in different places, and this is very common. So you'll have 3 different types of infrastructure teams, and they're all tracking in Excel slightly differently, all of their servers. That can result in duplicate and inaccurate data. Perhaps the server name that's in Team A's Excel sheet is incorrect, and Team B and C have it correct. And also then when it's not in a centralized system of engagement like ServiceNow, you can't use it in other processes. So it's purely just for tracking purposes. I can't tie an incident or a change request record to some data that's in Excel. Therefore, we're looking to have centralized data outcome that we want to manage. We want data management that's built on accuracy, and then we can leverage that data in ServiceNow to drive other processes such as incident and change. And then we want to track this through our KPIs like increased reporting capabilities. So now we can go in and see all of our servers in one place without having to ask 3 different teams to open up their own Excel sheets. We can also now see the relationships between that infrastructure and have that visibility instead of a single row that's just tracking, the server name, the IP address, and the serial number. We'd have a reduction in data sources, which would then reduce our operational data maintenance effort. So are there any questions on how we would just show value through the CMDB?
No, very well explained.
Okay. So what does a healthy CMDB support? Well, it supports a lot of things. You've heard me say things like it'll support our incident and problem and change management process, but it also supports the entire organization. So of course you have ITSM, so incident, problem, change, even service level management we can see. So you can measure your uptime and then report on that based on an individual CI component. And then you can group that together later on with CSDM, and we'll cover that. It also helps us maintain our IT security and privacy, things like compliance and our security controls. It can underpin a vulnerability response playbook that we wish to execute should we notice that some piece of infrastructure does have a vulnerability. It also allows us to successfully audit and deliver audits quickly because we've got traceability. And then we'll also have audit documentation. And then in some cases, it can also support our software license compliance. In event management, this is where there are tons of events happening within your infrastructure. And all of them might say, okay, the system's up, the system's up, the system's up constantly. But then that one day the event comes in saying the system is down, we can then use our CMDB to pinpoint what is down, when it went down, and then take action, either through automation or manually, to make sure that we're working towards resolving that event, indicating that it's down. This also gives us the impact breadth and depth understanding of how much did this event, when the system reporting down, impacts the entire organization. And then finally, your finance teams will be able to have billing verification and service costing will be able to become part of their calculations and their finance tracking. Are we okay? Or do we need to discuss anything further on the healthy CMDB support system?
No, all clear.
Great. So how do we achieve success? Well, there's 5 stages. So we need to set our direction, and this is where we articulate what to accomplish, our approach, our intended business outcomes, and then our ongoing measurements of those outcomes. And that last one's really key. We have to maintain our CMDB once we implement it, because your ecosystem is constantly changing as IT needs change, as the business needs change, as security threats are released and need to be patched. All of these things are making sure that we have to operationalize our CMDB after we implement it and then maintain that data to keep it as healthy as possible. The healthier our data is, the more we can trust it, and the more we trust it, the more we can leverage it.
Okay.
After we set our direction, we have to build our team and our governance model. This includes things that can be as basic as our naming convention. Who manages and owns this data? Who supports this data? Because the owner of a server may be different than the person that supports the server. So think of the owner of the server as the one who determines if we're going to purchase more hardware for it, and the one who supports it is the one who gets called if there's a problem. Then we design our configuration plan, and we're going to start small always, and we want to grow gradually and design the CMDB with configuration items or CIs. These are the actual data points, the routers, the servers, the applications that are running and their relationships to each other within your ecosystem. And even we don't have to get everything that first phase. Even starting small, like I said earlier, and then moving towards it generates value as soon as you have it, because as soon as it's in the CMDB, you can start leveraging it in those other processes and you can report on it. Then we have to show the value to other business units. So integrating business processes, and then you can tie those back to your goals, will help you communicate proactively about the changes you've made, and you can show the CMDB as a valuable asset to the entire organization. Just make sure. Okay. And then we're also going to manage our service health. And this is that ongoing maintenance piece where we're continually managing and updating the CMDB data to reflect what is actually happening in our infrastructure ecosystem. And there are three things that we usually look for at the high level. We want to test all of our CIs for completeness. Do we have all of the required and recommended data points populated in our CMDB? And then we look for correctness. And these CIs are tested against predefined data integrity rules, such as identification rules. How do we determine if we matched a CMDB CI or not? Sometimes it's just based on serial number. And this helps us detect duplicate CIs, orphaned CIs where there's data is missing or a relationship is broken, and also stale CIs. A lot of organizations struggle to manage the data because they don't know what is and isn't online. So having a stale CI process can allow you to set something to retired, and then you can still track it and know that it exists in your ecosystem, but based on how you use the data, you may not take action or report against it because the server is now no longer being used. And there's a CMDB health dashboard, and that's the place where we can go and check our scores for those 3 C's, which are again, completeness, correctness, and compliance. Oh, sorry, compliance is the data auditing for adherence to predefined certificates. So you can customize your audit rules and then flag any CIs that don't meet your compliance needs. Are there any questions on how we would achieve success through
So all these C's which you have talked about, like stale CI and all, so there are out-of-box reports which are available, right, in ServiceNow?
That's right. Yes, that's great. There are two main out-of-the-box reports. There's the CMDB view dashboard, and that's already installed in every instance. And there's also a free plugin or a free store app called the CMDB Foundations dashboard. And that's kind of the next evolution. So when we're running through this journey with customers, we first clean up everything in the CMDB view dashboard and make sure that the scores are as good as they can get within reason. And then we would look to either install or take action against the CMDB Foundations dashboard, which is a free store plugin.
So all the plugins which generally used, all these are free for CMDB
Yes.
at least.
Every single customer that is leveraging ServiceNow has access to the CMDB, and they're able to leverage it to suit their needs at no additional subscription cost. Now, there are other applications like Discovery, which will auto-populate your CMDB for you. There is a cost with that, and that's a separate discussion. But if you're currently tracking things in Excel, we can migrate that Excel data into ServiceNow, and you would not see any additional subscription costs with ServiceNow as a result of that.
Okay, fair.
Great
Please
question.
proceed.
Thank you. So now let's talk about the CSDM, or the Common Services Data Model. So it's a standardized set of terms and their definitions that can be used with all ServiceNow products. So it aligns your configuration items, or your CIs, and services with your business strategy. So the CSDM benefits you by connecting terminology to help make decisions for strategy, planning, developing, troubleshooting, root cause analysis, and even executing changes. So if you don't implement a CSDM correctly, you risk that the data in the application doesn't map to the correct CMDB table, and then you also can see an increase in duplicate, incorrect, and out-of-date data. So some of the reasons we implement this CSDM is because upgrading becomes an easier, more straightforward process. ServiceNow products will work better in conjunction with each other because they have common definitions established across the product portfolio. So things like incident, problem, and change all become more connected and operate better when you have successfully gotten to stage 2, at least, of your CSDM journey. And the use of CSDM will also provide transparent reporting and service costing, in addition to reduced overhead from services maintenance, because you're going to have a full understanding of all the infrastructure that's required to deliver that service. So our CSDM will also deliver the outcome of being able to effectively automate core service and operations processes as well. So how do we show value with the CSDM? Well, some of the challenges are that services are not formally defined. So what is labeled in as one service for team A may be labeled, the same service could be labeled differently for team B, and that can create a communication disconnect. Segmented data ownership is also a common issue. So perhaps the server team is tracking all of their infrastructure in SharePoint, and somebody else is tracking it in Confluence. So you've got multiple tools now being used, and they can't communicate easily. So, and that segmented data ownership requires a lot of manual effort to reach out and talk to that team and understand their side of things without being able to go into one single source, look at the data, understand it easily, and then be able to make a decision moving forward. And then sometimes there are also CMDB customizations that can't be related to the organization's products. So if you've got some custom classes or some custom data that you manage in your CMDB, we always want to make sure that it's adding enough value to make sure that the customization is worth it. So it's not to say we don't want to customize, it's just making sure that the customization is not only worth it to implement, but that it's also worth it to maintain it and upgrade it.
So these services are the same
Sure.
which we are storing in service table, right? Like email
There's a
service and
lot of
all.
tables that are leveraged in the CSDM, but yes, it does start with services, and then there's also business services and capabilities as
Application
you
service.
advance through the journey. Mhm.
Okay.
So the outcomes that we're looking to deliver are transparent reporting and service costing, and we can't do that without formally defining our services. Having consolidated data management will also allow us to use a single system of record and turn that into a single system of engagement to track this data and then ensure that we're managing it as efficiently as possible. And then we also can look to revert CMDB customizations to baseline where possible and where it makes sense. So we wouldn't want to revert something back to the baseline without, again, applying the now value framework to it and making sure that we'll actually get more value out of that action versus leaving it alone. And then our KPIs that we would use as an example are we'd see an increase in data accuracy. We'd have an understanding on service costs at this point. We'd see service maintenance overhead reduced, and we'd also see our upgrade efforts reduced because we've aligned all the teams into a single source or a single common services data model. So that's going to ensure that all the product lines are working together smoother, and therefore our upgrade efforts are going to be reduced. Are there any questions on this? I'm just going to grab.
No, I'm fine.
Great. So the CSDM, like the CMDB, does support us, and it supports standardization. So our data and our reporting and performance analytics and predictive intelligence all can benefit from having a standard data model that they can align to. It establishes a connection between IT architecture with business operations. And again, it connects all those ServiceNow products to each other. For example, I can have an incident come in against a server. I link that incident record to the server. That then evolves into a problem record, which is also linked to the CMDB server. And then finally, I need to launch an emergency change request to fix this issue. So I tie that change request to that same CI. That visibility and connection will allow for a lot of business operation decisions to be made, and it also ensures that everybody knows exactly what's happening with that one server, and they'll be able to see that from a single source, and then, like I said, take action with incident, problem, and change. It also allows us to define the ownership and the support group management. And this is a great way to know who owns and makes purchasing decisions. For example, ownership includes more than just purchasing, but who owns that data, and then also who decides if we're going to purchase against it or for it. And then also the support group management accelerates who do you call if there's an issue with this. Someone could say, oh, I noticed that this is server's down, but I don't know what it does. Well, they can easily look it up in the CMDB, see who the support group is, and then contact that group if they need to make sure that we're getting to the right people as fast as possible to reduce that MTTR, or mean time to resolution. It adds the business context, so you've got a better understanding of your infrastructure. You'll have increased visibility, and you can start moving into building a product portfolio that is built into business context and using business language, describing your business capabilities, describing your business services that you're providing, not only to internal stakeholders or within your organization, but also external people. Perhaps you're using the customer service management module in ServiceNow, and you can tie it to external customers that you're servicing. And then you'll have total service costing to support your finance operations, which will allow you to maximize your ROI on your ServiceNow products. And then you'll get this full value chain alignment. So you'll be able to see exactly the whole total cost of a service, because you'll have the visibility of the infrastructure, the relationships tied to that business service. So are there any questions relating what the CSDM supports?
No, I'm fine.
Great. So how do we achieve success? This is where we go to the foundation. So we build a strong foundation. This delivers accurate reporting. Then we move into the famous crawl stage, which has us focusing on application tables to build out the minimum information required to support incident, problem, and change management. Here's where, if you get to the end of this stage, you're leveraging CSDM in a meaningful way, and you're able to start measuring your value here. Once we've evolved past that, then we want to move to the walk stage, which has us addressing management and support of deployed application and infrastructure. Then the run stage, which has us incorporating business services. And this will help us understand the impact technology can have on the business. And then finally, the fly stage, which has us build out the remaining elements of CSDM and tie the technology and business services to business capabilities. And this builds out the full portfolio for us. So we'll be able to go into a single source and look at the entire business capability portfolio, look at what business services deliver each piece in the portfolio from the capability standpoint, and then the underlying infrastructure as well to deliver those individual services. So it can get very general with the business capabilities to very specific to a specific application that's running on a specific server that is critical to that service's uptime.
So, does
Oh,
this
sure.
CSDM related to business mapping, right? It's, or you can say, uh, business mapping is delivering a kind of CSDM.
Yeah, the main part of the CSDM journey is to add that business context. So, in the crawl stage, we're looking to just populate the application tables and build out that minimum information to support some basic functionality in incident, problem, and change. And then when you move forward into all the run and fly, now you're starting to look into what are my business services and how do these services impact the actual company or the business itself. And then we can build out the remaining elements in that last phase, and that'll tie your business services to your capabilities. So that's more of your service portfolio journey, but the CSDM is the foundation towards that.
Okay.
Now, if we look at data insights, how are we going to, report on this or run performance analytics? So, we use reporting to answer the question of where are we today? And we use performance analytics to answer the questions of where were we before? Did we improve? Where do we want to be? And when will we get there? Predictive intelligence is also a platform function, and it provides a layer of artificial intelligence, and that empowers features and capabilities across various ServiceNow applications. You can start using reporting today. Once you've stood up your reporting successfully, then you can build upon it and start using performance analytics. And then you need a minimum of 30,000 records to train predictive intelligence machine learning models. So that can be a little further in your journey. So we're going to cover reporting and performance analytics in a bit more detail.
Okay.
So in our reporting strategy, we are looking to say that we can't report on existing servers because it's segmented in Excel. So that's the challenge we're facing. So we use reporting and the CMDB to know that we've got centralized reporting now on all servers. And of course, as I said earlier, all the other CIs. But for this one example, we'll talk just servers. Having this consolidated place where all the data is stored then allows us to report on all of that data without having to reach out to multiple files or multiple places like multiple SharePoint folders, etc. So that's how we would answer that immediate question of where are we today with all of our servers? So how many Windows servers do I have running in production today? Reporting. Let's say we want to understand if our change requests are more successful over time. Well, that's where our performance analytics comes in and our CSDM. So we would have our change process say we're going to make a change to this CI and it impacts this service, this business service. We can measure those change requests over time and determine, are we having more issues, less issues in our change management process, or are we staying the same? And the outcome we get out of this would be complete visibility into that service-based results of our change requests over time. So are there any questions on the reporting and PA strategy?
No, I'm fine.
No? So we'll move now into the key takeaways. So the main things that we want to focus on, or I want you to remember, is that data quality is very, very important. So as I said earlier, as soon as we implement our CMDB and our CSDM, the next day it could change. The organization can add new infrastructure, could remove infrastructure, can change infrastructure. Your business is constantly evolving, therefore IT needs to meet the needs of today and focus on tomorrow. The day that we stop trusting the CMDB data is the day that we start to see that we're not managing it operationally. We want to address everything by looking at what challenge are we trying to overcome and what outcome are we trying to deliver. So when you're coming in and looking at, I want to do CMDB, make sure that there's a challenge you're trying to address and you need to have a target outcome so that we know what we're going to measure with a KPI. So these KPIs are critical to ensuring we can tell that success story and have the underlying supporting data required to make sure that the transformation journey story that we build, remember that champion phase of now value, is going to be effective and can be proven through that data. So again, we want to have high data quality. We want to focus our strategy on addressing challenges to deliver outcomes. And then we want to measure our success through agreed upon KPIs. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And we can now move to the discussion phase if you'd like.
Yeah, amazing presentation. And, uh, the things which you have described is very well to the point and describing the issues, challenges, and remediations in a very straightforward way.
Oh, good.
I
Thank
hope,
you so much.
yeah, whoever listens to it definitely get a value from that. So,
Mhm.
based on this, I have a few questions.
Sure.
Let me. Okay, so, what are the losses a customer bear with a bad CMDB? Any example which you have seen in your uh, throughout experience?
I've seen two common themes, and I'm sure there are different journeys, but this is just my personal experience. The first common one is that a customer will come in and implement a product like Discovery. So Discovery combs or crawls through your entire infrastructure and populates your CMDB for you. So they'll say, okay, we're going to do a 3-month discovery project. They get everything into the CMDB and it's this huge success. Yay, we didn't even know we had certain pieces of infrastructure and now we do because Discovery automatically found it for us. We weren't tracking it manually before. Once the project rolls off though and closes, sometimes they don't have a operational maintenance plan. So
Okay.
they'll submit a change request and not tie it to that data. Or they won't update the data to say this server is now taken offline and has been replaced by another one. And as soon as they get into that operational phase where they're not maintaining it, the trust is beginning to erode from the CMDB data because the more inaccurate it is, the less you can trust it, and therefore the less it will be used. A recent example this year was that exact situation. Discovery was successfully implemented. Everybody enjoyed the cake cutting. And then 3 months after we cut the cake, they came back and asked, saying, this data is terrible and out of date now, but they weren't maintaining it. So we then came back in. We had to regroom the data to get it back to as pristine as we could. And then while we were doing that, we also provided organizational change management to ensure that they knew how to maintain it moving forward. So the IT teams knew what their responsibilities were when it came to maintaining it. The process owners or the infrastructure IT owners knew what they were supposed to do and how to report and access the information they needed to make purchasing decisions. And I harp on the purchasing a lot, and I know there's a lot more to that role, but just want to make sure that they were managing everything and making that and getting the most value out of it that they could, because they were also going through an IT refresh phase. So
Okay.
yeah, that's
So,
the first journey. Sorry, the second one is that they don't understand or need to fully define processes. So a common one is that as soon as we're doing our CMDB journey, we need to know how long before a CI becomes stale. So if we're trying to discover it once a week, how many weeks have to go by before when we don't discover it and we consider it stale and then we take action? So these types of decisions have to be made because they're going to support that system of engagement piece and turn ServiceNow from that system of record into, okay, now something has happened in the system. I haven't seen this specific server for 3 months. Now I'm going to go in and retire it, or submit a change request and retire it, or follow all of their internal processes. And then once they've got that process digitized in ServiceNow, we then come in and look for automation opportunities. Maybe we auto retire it for specific ones, things like that.
okay, fair. One more question.
Mhm.
If we talk about discovery, what is
Mhm.
the, expected or minimum infrastructure size to start discovery or to at least go for discovery? There are various clients available, right? Small,
Mhm.
medium, and large. So any
Yes.
expected infrastructure size, number of
You would
infrastructure
most
components?
Sure. You would most likely want to be a medium-sized company with a medium-sized level of infrastructure. And this can also be cloud-based infrastructure as well. The reason for that is you need the value of implementing discovery, purchasing discovery, and then maintaining it to be worth it. So if we're tracking, I run a small firm. So I would not need discovery to detect the 3 computers I use and the 1 router. I don't need that. It just wouldn't add enough value to automatically discover it. I can detect that myself, log it, etc., and enter it manually into ServiceNow. I'm not saying if you don't use discovery, you still can use the CMDB. Discovery is just auto-populating it. So that medium sized is kind of the first part, or the first level, I would say, to consider it. Then we would need to look at how much would it cost to purchase, implement, and then maintain discovery, and evaluate that against the value we would get out of it. In some cases, discovery can reduce the infrastructure team's workload, by 50%, because they don't have to go into Excel and maintain everything manually. If they just trust the job runs and updates the record in ServiceNow, that frees them up from doing manual work that is lower value, and then allows them to become more strategic, or perhaps they can take on a project and that adds value. So it's a value question that it turns the decision into a business question rather than an IT. It isn't can we, it is should we, and here's why we should or should not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one more question.
Sure.
How to optimize a CMDB with a lots and lots of data? Right now data is coming from various sources. So what are the practical ways to optimize that CMDB, which is, having huge data? I'm not talking about the medium or large, but there are data companies which are working, and let's say media company, and also they are getting huge data. So what are the practical ways to tackle such amount of data in CMDB?
Well, your first phase would always be making sure that you're filtering out all of the items that are retired or not in the ecosystem. So I've worked with companies that have millions of records in the CMDB. So having filters across the entire organization and all of the infrastructure pieces that use them within ServiceNow, to only look at what you consider to be active CIs, will be the first phase. This cuts a lot of the noise out. From there, you would want to adjust all of your CMDB view and dashboard settings to make sure that you're looking at what that active data is and where your largest pain points are. And you simply break it down class by class. This is not let's come in and rework the whole CMDB and take 3-4 months to do so before we get anything into production. This is the approach of, let's first filter out all of the inactive data. That can be done in a week. Then next week, let's look, this is the top class, Windows Server. We have the most stale CIs for Windows servers. There's thousands of them. Let's address that first and continually work the largest number of records that are impacting you and start cleaning that data up in a journey-based approach. You're not going to climb Mount Everest in one day. You have to first get to base camp 1. Then you rest. Then you go to the next one. And after that, so you occasionally look up at the top of the mountain, but you're always trying to also look down at the next steps in front of you and the next milestone.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay, so one interesting question, maybe you can call it a silly one, but you know, everything has some advantages and disadvantages. So we
Yep.
have tons of advantages of CMDB. Any
Mhm.
disadvantage you think of?
You need to understand that there is that operational cost to it, and that maintenance piece. So the value, I feel, is always there, and it outweighs the effort it takes to maintain it. But organizations do either need to have a ServiceNow partner kind of act as their CMDB admin, or they need someone who is their CMDB admin internally, who oversees all of the data and kind of chases down the groups that have the highest number of issues, or have a critical thing that need resolving in that CMDB. That does kind of, I guess you could put that in the cons column, because it's adding effort that's required. But again, I think that it definitely outweighs, the effort is outweighed by the value you get out of that from an organization as a whole.
Okay.
In addition to that, maintaining discovery and other projects or products can have high entry costs and then implementation costs on top of it. But you don't have to, again, think of, I need to get to the top of Mount Everest in one day. You can implement one small piece and start seeing value from that one piece. If I can get all my Windows servers in one place, and then I can have enough data to support incident, problem, and change for just Windows servers, that's a win. And then I maintain it. And then I can add another one, and another one, and another one. So try to think of steps in front of you, starting small, continuing small, and then you'll be able to invest less but see those returns still.
Okay. So implementation planning is also very much important. If we do not do that, it will result in much more drastic way that we think of. We are spending money, infrastructure is there, but still nothing will be helpful.
That's right. And that Now Create methodology will definitely help you implement some of these projects, including CMDB, because they've already got playbooks and customer success artifacts that you can use to see what other people have done to be successful. And they actually also include some pitfalls. So don't avoid this because this is the impacts of it. So avoid perhaps just a straight data dump because there's too much in there. Groom the data first, then import it. You don't it's usually not recommended to just turn discovery on and let it comb your entire network. You focus discovery first and pull in a specific piece so that you can test it without the noise, without all the extra data.
Okay. So do you have any kind of, case studies with respect to such experiences available on your website or somewhere?
On mine, no, we've done a lot of partner consulting. So that would be covered under those partner agreements that I have.
Okay.
But I can speak in generic terms and talk about certain clients or certain industries that I've worked with and some of the challenges that they've faced. An example would be that one company was in the telecommunications industry, and they had millions of CIs. And when they were trying to launch and link an incident to a CI, it was taking upwards of 2 minutes to load them all in the choice list on the incident form. So their help desk technicians were suffering, and it was taking, you're sitting with a client on the phone, the server's down, and they have to wait 2 minutes for something to load. So we needed to find a way to make sure that we could load that data quickly, make sure that the call times were getting back to, as fast as they could be, and we were still accurate. So it wasn't about preventing them from loading or having all the choices, but filtering it in a way that they could quickly access the data they needed.
So that time, was it the infrastructure or the amount of data which is causing, or both?
It was the amount of data that was causing ServiceNow performance issues. So the original configuration was they click the magnifying glass on the incident form, and then they would wait for 3.5 million records to load.
Okay.
Versus we filtered that data through a reference qualifier in a way that made sense for them, that weeded out all the data they would never log a record, an incident against, in that one form. And the approach we had to take on the problem form was different than that. So it was a whole journey on how do we manage this as a single issue. So let's say the incident process. How does this impact other processes like ITSM, like problem or change? And then how does this impact the platform as a whole? And then how does this impact the business? So the ServiceNow is integrated with a lot of the systems in this case. So we needed to make sure that we were pulling the right data and trusting the data from different sources correctly. So, one data source was not as trustworthy as another one based on their IT teams, that infrastructure team's knowledge. So we had to set it up as a higher trust in the integration settings.
Okay, so the truth is data is increasing day by day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the example which you have shown here with telecommunication client, it will
Yep.
come to each and every client day today, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So, what structural or architectural changes we need to do? Can we have more than one CMDB table or something like that, which you may provision?
Well, in the CMDB, there are just over 800 tables for individual classes. So there's like the Windows Server table, there's a Linux server table, there's router switches, all that stuff. So the framework is there, and the relationship between the tables exists. From
That
the
I know.
vault.
That thing I know. Means, but
Okay.
in a CI for an incident, we only link only one table, right? CMDB CI
Right.
table. So,
Well,
how to
and that's
manage that thing?
yeah, so that's where the dynamic reference qualifier solution worked for us. So
Okay.
instead of just loading from the CMDB CI table, we kind of set up different forms with different points to the CMDB, and that reduced a lot of the noise. So we weren't having multiple people querying the whole CMDB every time. In addition to that, the reference qualifiers naturally excluded everything that was retired. So that
Okay.
actually cut 3.5 million CIs down to just over one. So we saw a
Okay.
huge performance increase from that. And that was kind of like, we plugged the hole in the ship with that, and then we still had to get the water out. So we closed the gap on the form, and excluded all the retired data. Then we went through and built a trustworthy reference qualifier to help filter it further to improve that performance. Another option that was presented was adding more nodes to ServiceNow, or basically adding more horsepower to it, but that wasn't an option at that time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
So with this, Chris, I already asked all the questions which I do have. And before we wind up, do you want to say anything to the customers, or you can say users?
Well, I would just like to say thank you to you, Omender. I mean, I really enjoy watching your podcast. I know some of the videos are shorter, so I appreciate you taking the time to have a longer one with me. And just keep up the great work. I really enjoy seeing your work on LinkedIn. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. And I do appreciate all the efforts which you have put in that, real-time explanations, and your PPT is amazing. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for showing it for all of us.
Happy to help. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing everybody out in the ecosystem.
Sure. Same here.
Okay.